Hi guys, it's from DRH. I'm a third year Archi student, and I'm here to give you guys a basic vRay render, how to set it up, how to apply materials, how to render, and how to save that render. Let's get started. So, first thing, obviously you will have your object ready. So for instance, I'm going to use this box 5x5x5. First thing you want to do is change your current render from Rhino render to vRay render, just like what I've done here. And you can tell the difference in those renders if you hover over to it. Rhino is more clay renders, and vRay, and obviously the UI for the Rhino render is different compared to the vRay render. So if you didn't follow this step and you just went straight to the vRay asset editor, which what we'll be using, it's going to give you this error message saying please choose vRay as your current renderer. So you want to change that, and now that's vRay. And to change the settings on all this, how to apply materials, how to set it up and all that, we'll be using this tool right here, which is the vRay asset editor. Click into that. Boom. So it's going to give you this UI over here, and first thing you want to do is change this quality from medium quality to very high quality. That just optimizes the performance of this render. And there's two types of engines that we'll be using, so you can either use your CPU or your GPU as your renderer. So CPU is your CPU, obviously, and if your CPU is much stronger than your GPU, then I suggest you use your CPU. Vice versa, if your graphics card is much better than your CPU, then use that. I normally use graphics card. And tip for using GPU render, make sure that the GPU, your graphics card, is selected, not that one, because that's the integrated graphics card from your CPU. Yep. Then you want to go to materials. To apply materials, pre-select this. And then you're probably wondering where's the materials, although I selected it. You have to open this tab over here, and it's going to give you this whole library of materials. So say I want to add wood into it. Say, I don't know, laminate CO2, right click, apply to selection, and it should be applied to your selection. Sometimes it won't be to scale. So like here it's 120 cm. Some is 50, some is 50, some is 100. You can always change that by going to selecting your object with the vRay materials embedded into it. Texture mapping, apply box mapping. Say if you set at 1 to 100, you go 100, 100, 100, boom. Sometimes it won't change the material on your current viewport, but once you actually start rendering, it's going to change. And I'm actually going to undo it because let's set to the actual current render. Then we go back under settings. We go to render output. Excuse me. So you can always change the aspect ratio of the render that you're going to be doing. I normally keep it at 16:9. And the only thing that I change is the image width and height. So a rule to myself when I do renders is the higher this number, the more clear the image gets. There is a table online that you can search up for like A4, A0 pages. They have specific image width and height, but I follow the rule that the higher, the better, the more clear it is. So I normally test out my renders at 800 just to see if I got it in the right position, and that's one thing I'll be tackling next. So yeah, 800 just to test it. So you can go lower if you want, but 800 is kind of like the minimum. So to save a view, you go to set view, press this thing, name views, and say this is the render view that I want to do. Press save as, call it say perspective 01. I can lose my thing anywhere, click into this, it's gonna bring me back to this. Or even if you lose your thing, just Control A to select all. To zoom into it, ZSA, press this again, and it's gonna give you that view. just in case if you guys get lost into your model. So if I'm pretty happy with this set view over here, go back to this. I normally double check with vRay Interactive just to check if that's the viewport I want. So with vRay Interactive, you can move your object and you can look at it into whichever viewport you want to look at it at. So say you change your mind, actually I want this view over here, leave it at that, close this render, double check if everything is on CPU, GPU or whatnot, change that to this TPO looking one, which will be render with vRay, and then you just wait a few seconds, boom, that's finished. But that's just a 800 quality. So like what I said before, the higher the better, but with that the longer it will take. So we'll try 2000 and we'll render that. So yeah, the higher the number, the longer it will take. Some instances it'll take seconds, some will be minutes, depending on the heaviness of the material and how much of that material you have on your model. So obviously the more complicated, the longer it will take, so on and so forth. It's finished. And then to save the render, you go to this save panel, and it's going to give you this and say test render 03, and you can save it as a PNG, bitmap, whatever you need it. I normally save it as a PNG. Save it, look for it in your files, which I'll do in my thing. Just give me a second. Got it here, practice render, say it there, voila, there it is. And yes, that's basically just the basic principles of rendering. One thing as well as a tip, you can go to render elements, you can add elements to it, global illumination, atmosphere, background, acoustics, denoiser, and I'll leave that to you guys to play around with. It basically just adds flavor to your render that you can access. Say if I added material ID, normals and bump. Once that render finishes, should be so when that render is finished, you can obviously go now to see your render elements. When you click this bar, give you the alpha, global illumination, material ID, bump normal, so on and so forth. Sometimes you can use it for media, whatnot, or even design. And yeah, that's just the basics. There's materials, and you can always, and one tip with materials, you can change the diffuse of it. You can even change the color of it. You just gotta apply the selection, and that would change that. And then change the roughness, reflection, but that's up to you guys to play around with. And yeah, so we'll be creating a PDF version of this if you guys want just to have a read and whatnot, and we'll just keep you guys updated. Stay safe.